Is that good? Okay. I've been. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. No. I've been warned that I should not take 45 minutes in my introduction because we do only have an hour. So I'll be brief, but I could go on and on. First of all, I just want to welcome you to the first lecture of the fall semester for the 2013-14 Visiting Artists Lecture Series. So this is our very first lecture this year, and I have the privilege to welcome LIV Aanrud this afternoon. LIV is an artist living and working in Los Angeles. So she braved the traffic through Carpinteria to get here, and she's in one piece. So thank you, LIV, for doing that. LIV received her Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree at the University of Wisconsin. She received her MFA at Rutgers University, where she also received a teaching fellow. Recent exhibitions include The Invisible Host at Underdonk Gallery in New York, and 10 Years Too Late at and I'm going to mess this up, at Beltjung IAM in Berlin, Germany. I'm almost confident that I messed that up. And she has exhibited at the Shore Institute of Contemporary Art, as well as White Box Gallery in New York. LIV is a good friend of mine. She's a great artist and just a very lovely human being. So please join me in welcoming her to SBCC.
Thanks, Brian. I'll put it here and then I'll put that there. Hello. Okay, so. Oh boy. Oh wait, shoot. Yeah, chalkboard, and then this is at least it's consistent. My days. I keep hitting the chalkboard. It's okay if the lights are on too. There, okay. All right. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be at the #1 community college in the nation. This I just thought I would start out with something that been working on recently, and then kind of skip around a little bit, give you a little backstory as to how I got here. How did I get here? And I thought maybe a way to just start it is to maybe read a brief artist statement that I wrote. It's from a few months ago. I wrote, "I'm a storyteller. I speak fast. I digress, get off track and back on. I ramble as one thought leads to another, words and hands flying. My fabric work seems to be invented in a similar way. A stitched run-on sentence, a consciousness stream that's about a 1/4 inch wide. What results is a kind of sewn painting, a string drawing, where a line is dragged inch by inch, an image emerges, pulled up to the surface from wherever it lives below. The frame is filled intuitively, deliberately, meditatively, and a bit blindly, as the work drifts in and out of focus. My eyes tired, my mind wanders, inviting a kind of seeing through feeling. Additionally, I work close to the piece in sections, and I never quite see this exquisite corpse in its entirety. And I hope they invite the most open-ended reading possible, with any conclusions soon undone by the process of looking at them." So that kind of describes this. It's called Splash Factor. This is roughly, not quite the original size. It's 10 feet wide by 4 feet high. And the technique is an old folk art form that's popular in rural America. And as Brian said, I'm from Wisconsin, and as I've kind of gone through and tried to figure out, a path in my work, I do recognize that like these sort of rural roots and this kind of farm avenue is important. Even my name, LIV Aanrud, is literally translates. LIV means life, and Aanrud is the name of the farm that my family came from in Norway in like the 1880s. Not that long, or a long time ago. Anyway, so it's kind of like my name means life on a farm. And I used to think that was just like a bad joke. When I was a kid, I thought, well, I need to get out of here. But now I see how it kind of shaped not only like my personal life or my personality, but how this kind of fits into my identity. That's my pops up on the farm in the furrowed fields. And this I call Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And this kind of sums up like a lot of different things for me, because it's the worst photo I hope that's ever been taken of me so far. And it kind of describes maybe in a way how I had to develop a sense of humor young, as like defense and as deterrent. And I think somehow like I still aim for like a sense of humor in my artwork because of that, because I still sort of feel like this, whatever, this scared rabbit right here. And there's also like, so you get the landscape, you get this, like growing up, studying the landscape is sort of offering clues, the weather, even just like living on a dead-end road, always kind of searching and sort of trying to find, to navigate that visual world. And we didn't have like a lot of, TV or, it was before the internet and all this kind of stuff. And so I guess it was like this unmediated world that I think really wore its own path towards painting for me and towards abstraction. But sort of without like a real active engagement in like contemporary work. I was just sort of outside and trying to figure it out. So let's see. So I went to University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire. That's remember the artist Bon Iver? That's where he's living. It's the only way that anybody knows where that university is. But it was a great experience to go to school there. And I mean, when I first started, I was doing illustration. I was trying to do stuff that I thought would be funny, that I thought was accessible. I didn't even go to an art museum until I was like 15, just because it was at least 4 hours away. So just wasn't available to me. And so I didn't really understand contemporary art. I didn't really have like an avenue in as far as I was concerned. So I would do stuff like this. I was making these like, illustrations of like guys getting thrown out of parties, and just thought stuff that it was based on this character I made up. And anyway, finally I met this guy right here, Steve Katrositz, who really became a mentor and a really great sort of person to sort of translate and introduce me to art, mainly by taking us all every year to New York, which was a really big experience to try to understand like how things work and what's happening and how do you enter in that conversation. There he is, and he's still a long-term friend of mine. I mean, I saw him last week. So I think I still wanted art that was like accessible and that was humorous and that I still felt like I had an avenue into. And I remember like this, it's a really bad photo because it's really old and it's blurry, but you kind of get the idea of like that, that painting for me, like when I finally started to get into the conversation, like the idea of like a painting coming into its own terms, like that it could be playful, that it could be kind of strange, and that it was a series of negotiations, like setting something up and sort of reacting to it, and the painting kind of coming into being as a system that kind of revealed itself as it came along. So I was making these kind of smaller scale abstract paintings and living in various, I moved to Amsterdam and I moved to Chicago and I moved around a bit, and then I finally came back to Wisconsin. I lived in the woods at this old cabin, the way that people tend to do in Wisconsin. And so I was making these abstract paintings really with not a whole lot of outside critique. And so I was just kind of going for it, but a lot of the content had to do with trying to create like a tension within the painting, trying to create a push and pull between like what catches your attention, what slides back, using color and perspective as ways to sort of create a moment in a scenario. And still having, I think, a lot to do in a way with landscape and how that worked continuously. Like there's a sense of like wateriness and like like the lakes I was living on and all these places I was living where there's like this constant sense of space and vastness kind of being crunched in on itself. At least I hope. Oh yeah. Then I left the country and I went to New Jersey. And I started this series. I mean, at this point, I was like still working in a small scale, and trying to create these these elements that kind of strained on each other, or that were pushing a little bit. And then at this point, paint itself, the physicality of paint, really became like its own character. And so I kind of liked this idea that like the paint was pushing against something, and that there was this little activity, like this little burst of this red, but then there's also this little foot that's pushing out, and there's still like this awkwardness, and there's still this kind of haphazard sense about the painting. I think eventually, so at this point I'm making paintings that are kind of, like I said, like I'd start with one thing, and I didn't really have a plan. Like that's never been my strategy. I kind of was still trying to set up a problem, and trying to resolve it, or trying to push it into a point where it kind of felt a little more comfortable. Like how can something be awkward but also kind of comfortable, or like kind of strange but elegant? Maybe this might not be the best case. But and so this one too, I don't know if you can see it, there's a rectangle kind of pushing out from inside this. It's almost like a seasick feeling, I think, about like looking out of a boat onto the water, and kind of like I want things to kind of at this point seem like there's a shift happening, like something, it's in a transition, and you're kind of capturing that moment. And that's the kind of potential for a narrative within an abstract painting, like not only within the painting, but between works in the series. So I still tended to work at this point definitely in a series, so kind of working on one at a time, but within this bigger kind of conversation. And this one too, I mean, you can kind of see this like ship or something that's kind of emerging out of this atmosphere. So the idea of like something emerging, and something like the conflation maybe of paint, like the painted illusion, and then the actual physical illusion that's happening. So like maybe when you're looking at it, you're not quite sure what's real and what's painted. And I mean, I kind of like that. I like that how that did for me still relate back to looking at nature, and how the natural is created, and how there are these little tricks. You see like the skyline, and it's a little bit wrapped in the clouds, and I suppose out here it's like the ocean. You're looking at the ocean, and it kind of, you lose a horizon, and things kind of shift and are always kind of changing, and so it's a slower read, and I like that. I like how that can operate. This one's called My Angle. Again, these are fairly small. This is probably a foot by a foot. And I was experimenting with using watercolor, trying to create this sort of this mist of paint, and really like seeing where there's a potential for the paint to act as like as a shield, or as a camouflage or disguise for the shape, and sometimes it operates as like something that points out this the sculptural element. And in a way too, so I found this sculptural medium that really like helped me push things on a bit. It's a lightweight, it's called Sculptamold, and it's really lightweight, and you can sand it, and it dries fast. So all the problems that I had using like gel medium and different like modeling paste and this kind of stuff is that it took a while to dry. It was this whole process, and it really interrupted my kind of impulsive need to keep, like working on it. Like I would sit with a painting for maybe 10 minutes, and then I'd be like, okay, keep going. So it's a different process than some people, but I needed to keep that moving. And so the Sculptamold, took like a day or two to dry, and then I would just get right onto it. So in some ways I would try to think of like, maybe a strategy would be to make the most awkward thing possible. Make something that looks really heavy, and then how do you make that look light? Or how do you make that kind of look elegant and go from looking like a stone to looking like cloth, or looking like this, something that could be like what is it? Is it clay? Is it paint? Like something that required, again, like a slow read, and something that, and maybe I think in a way I was trying to slow things down. I mean, I tend to be kind of overwhelmed with things, and I like the idea that, a painting as a window into, a world that was kind of chugging along a little bit slower, and that was maybe something that I could handle. And this also, this is going back to my farm life, where things are just kind of thrown in the woods, and sort of things are overgrown. I mean, my grandpa's truck that's older than I am is still in the woods, and he died before I was born. But there's this sinking of things back into the world, and this overgrowth. And I was thinking a lot about that kind of stuff when I was looking at my paintings and thinking of how there's this covering, or there's this emergence, and there's that tension. And I kind of started to recognize how it came out of where I'm from, this sort of weird sense that you don't let anything go, nothing is gone, and no one is, I think in a way it's like a way of dealing with loss in this kind of Norwegian family where you don't talk about stuff, you just put it in the woods and then walk away and just work and do something, just do something else. So it was a way to kind of, I guess, tie in, I think, what I'm working on, and feel like it's coming from a place that I recognize, because I'm not always super comfortable with theory and how my painting fits into the larger conversation. Sometimes I'm not sure how to participate in that or where I sit in it, so I'm still kind of coming into it in my own terms. This is a lake where, it's like that trick I was saying where, where's the horizon? There's these little tricks. There's this flip that goes on, and those are the kind of things I look at and give me ideas for painting, I guess. This one's called Right Round. So in some ways, the painting itself, the sculptural medium, became a way that the paint, I always paint on the ground. I never have an easel or anything, so I'm always kind of hovering above, and the sculptural part almost became a way to create the painting, because the paint had to react to it. So it was this kind of back and forth between the surface and the paint, and trying to figure out how things were going to work, and making a lot of mistakes, and really leaving room for those mistakes, not having a plan, but sort of welcoming that alchemy that happens between your brain and your hand, where opening yourself up to failure. It's my thing. So again, using lots of different kinds of paint, and watercolor, and different kinds of fluid acrylics. So that they're these kind of pieces. It's they seem like they're sections of a world or something, they're chunks. This is a old, famous painting that you might know. It's J. DeFeo, The Rose, the White Rose. And I guess I was just, in some ways, thinking, I think about this painting a lot, and what it means, as a painter, as a woman, as somebody who's sort of building a world, or building a part of a world, and also taking on something that eventually, in my later work, just taking on something that's way too big and seeing what you can do with that sense of being overwhelmed, how it can kind of feed your practice. This is a concretion. These are these stones that are, they're native to Lake Superior in Wisconsin, and Native Americans call them spirit stones, and they have this this anthropomorphic kind of quality. I mean, they look like people, or they look like part of another world. They look like characters to me. And so these are just kind of points of landscape that I think that I was kind of dealing, when I look at this painting, I kind of think that there is this sense of how the natural is created again, how things can be formed, and how the painting was like I'm bringing something into being that's really strange, and that's really like, this one's so sci-fi and kind of like kind of unsettling, but just to see how and making like really the most uncomfortable, gross, like sort of clumsy shape, like how to sort of incorporate that into a painting. Like that became my my goal. Here's another one too, where it has this topographical sense, like I'm working above it, but at the same time, like once it gets put on a wall, then there's like these different associations with, like, there's a different kind of physicality of like the body, and like you see the hand, you see where it's like handmade, like, and then the paint becomes this sort of shield. I mean, I was spray painting, I was using screens over the top to try to kind of conflate, like push these two things together, to try to make something that looks light and heavy at the same time. This is another one that's like, again, like a skyscape, like Northern Lights, like something pushing out from the sky. This one's called Wing of Desire. And again, like thinking about that white rose, like that kind of sense that you're kind of seeing through something into like an expanse. But I mean, I kind of stumble upon all this stuff, like the way that I was working it, it would go through like 30 or 40 paintings, and then sort of, and then it'd sort of settle in on something that I think, okay, I guess I can stop now, or it kind of comes into its own terms. And that's how my painting practice is like sustained, is like that idea that you're grappling at something. There's this Picasso quote. It says like, I do not seek, I find. And I like that, the idea of like finding a painting. This is something that's I built this with two friends back in Chicago. It's a really terrible picture, but it kind of relates to these sculptural paintings again. It was, we were kind of laughing about making like a life-size Monet haystack in my friend's apartment. And so we did that, and it was like fluorescent orange, kind of pink, and it was about 9 feet by like 10 feet wide. And we built it in there, and then he lived with it for about a year. So it just became this character, and like, just the more I started like working on these paintings, I had almost forgotten that I'd done this, because it was like years before. I think it was about 2000, 2001. But I started to see this kind of like this conversation that was going back to that, like this really chunky, strange thing that was kind of had its own life force or something. And so some of my paintings, like I felt like there was that potential, that it was. There's like an urgency in how some of the paintings came into being, or what they required. So again, like trying to make something that's kind of clumsy and obvious or something, like a big bullseye. Like how do I make that sort of sit back and not be the first thing you see, not be the thing that's like screaming at you? How do I kind of confuse that? That was what I was aiming for. I like paintings that look like paper, that you're not sure not only what you're seeing, but what it's made out of. And that one's hilarious. It's called Smile Without a Face. This is When Teardrops Fall. so there's moments when, these paintings in person, they tend to photograph a little odd, but, there's a sense that you don't, like, ideally I was trying to kind of get that teardrop shape to sort of sit back or not, you kind of discover it. Like, it's part of the painting, but it's not like this big, clumsy thing. Like, it's fitted in there, and it's situated in there, and it's, yeah, I hope. This one's called Surprise Encounter. Just because I was thinking, like, what's almost like the stupidest thing that you could put on a painting and try, like, the biggest problem I could create is to put, like, an exclamation point on a painting and then try to, like, act like it's not there. And also just, like, as a joke or as, like, a sense of humor to have a painting that's, like, not like an automatopoeia, but, like, the painting itself is, like, the joke, like an exclamation point that just, like, all of a sudden you see it and it's a surprise. Like, I wanted that effect. Like, I wanted the painting to kind of be in its own joke. And then there's this, like, sort of shape that's just kind of waving, like, surprise. I kind of like that. So then at this point I'm still kind of fuddling around and trying to find a way to work through these paintings, but at the same time I realized, like, I realized I kind of had, like, a strategy going that I was, even though the whole point was to put a monkey wrench in the whole works, like, I was still becoming kind of reliant on, like, okay, put on the shape, work with the paint. It was becoming a bit prescriptive, and I realized that, I didn't want to know my strategy as well as I was starting to. And I went home to my folks' place, and at this point I was still in Rutgers, and I found this rug that my grandma had made, and it sort of became this kind of totem thing where she had died when I was a kid, but she really helped raise me and, like, taught me how to draw and was a really big influence in, like, how I kind of understood myself as an artist as a kid. And so finding this, I was really perplexed. Like, I didn't know that she had made this, and I didn't really understand, like, most of the time rag rugs are really, like, more decorative, and like, people make scenes, and it'll say, Home Sweet Home, or it'll have, like, one of our neighbors made, like, every state, which they're really great, but it's like every state she made a rug that kind of described the state, and it was the shape of a state. So this thing to me felt like so much more sophisticated and so strange, and something that I just couldn't quite put my finger on, like, how did it work, like, and she of course is gone, so I couldn't really talk to her about it. And so I just had it in my studio, and I was looking at it all the time, and trying to figure out, like, what this language was and how I could decipher it and how I can, in a way, use it. So I started, like, making paintings from some of these shapes, kind of using this abstract, kind of these symbols as I saw them, trying to put them into a new context and trying to just see how I could spin them around. This is just a close-up. But I liked that that there wasn't really a logic involved. Like, it was just, like, it's held together by its own necessity. Like, it's sort of piled up on itself, and it's holding its own self together. And it to me, it's like this cross section. It's like it looks like a body. It looks like so many different things. It's so, like, organic and intuitive, and all the things that I was trying to kind of get at. So at one point I just decided to, like, make a painting of that rug, and so that's what this is. And then from there I was thinking, what if I just start making a rug from some of the other paintings I was working on. And I had no idea how to really do this, but I just looked it up on YouTube, and I did some research, and I figured out how to construct it. One more thing, I guess I missed one more thing about these kind of like physical, these like sculptural paintings, just as a way to sort of sum that up before I moved on to the rugs. I was going to say, this is another excerpt that I wrote about it that I think might help explain it probably better than I just did. But I could say, I think one could say I'm a landscape painter of sorts. I was a farm kid raised on a lake, and I'm interested in finding vastness, air, light, and shadow in a painting. The painting themselves are tactile and topographical. On some, the surface determines a piece, a small-scale manifest destiny of paint on strange terrain. Other paintings require a bit more improvisation and intervention, but there's always a sense that I'm not sure where it's all going, who's in charge, or if any of it's serious. Peculiar balance is struck where both the relief and the painting elements shift into various levels of focus, like walking onto a frozen lake, barely able to see through the cold, finding the horizon, then losing it to the snow. Time slows as if proportional to the temperature. Stillness surrounds, the ice groans, all is snow-covered and under the spell of winter. So that's again like how landscape is a reoccurring thing. So I started working on these rugs, and I started making this piece that basically I was looking around my studio and looking at the paintings that I couldn't quite figure out, and then I decided like how can I take elements from those and sort of incorporate them into a rug or into this sort of fabric painting. And this was a big experiment. Like, and I don't even know. I mean, this one is about 7 feet by about 3 feet. And I was still trying to figure out material. I was using wool. I was kind of stumbling along. Like, it's really ham-handed to me. Like, it seems like I was really, just kind of tugging and straining against this thing. And sometimes I look at this thing and it looks like it could be like 100 years old or something, just because it was so worn by the time I got through it. I mean, I was dragging it around and trying to bleach it and trying to figure out how to combine this new material itself into a painting, and how without painting over it, how to use the terms that I apply to a painting to this. And then I kept going with this and basically finding other material. At this point, I'm using cotton flannel, and I cut it into like just a lot of little strips, and I'm hooking it through with just this one little hook that I always have, and then I lose it, and then I find it again, and it's like it's my one tool. I went from having paintbrushes and a power sander and goggles and all this stuff, and this whole studio practice where there's a setup and there's this whole cleanup, and all of a sudden now I'm just working in a way that like really fit into more of my life. At this point, I had moved back to Wisconsin, married my husband, and then I was kind of waiting around trying to figure out what we were going to do. Kind of had my scopes on Los Angeles. And still working working in a way where I can see at this point still I'm like looking at a lot of folk art and looking at making like pieces of something still within that frame of like how my paintings were. It's still kind of a square, still about the same size, and then things sort of get out of control a little bit more as I go. This one's just called Cyclops. At this point, we had decided we're moving to Los Angeles, and so I had this big, transition and shift in trying to figure out like how I'm going to keep working in my studio. I don't even have a studio. And the thing is, I just realized like the painting at this point kind of went out the window. Like I really liked the idea that I could work on this wherever, I could work on it while I'm, in a living room. I could drag it outside. I could kind of take it with me, pick it up. Like it didn't have to be this whole process. And And I like the idea that I could really like let myself like go and not have, I mean, all this idea of like how a painting came into being and like being intuitive and trying to like let this thing really happen almost through me, really started to come together, where, you know, I would start, I had like a stretcher bar, and I'm stretching the burlap over it, and so I could start from like any point, like I could work on it from the side, I could work on it upside down, like the whole orientation is kind of up in the air until the very end. And it's a great way to, like, for me, I mean, going back to this idea of like work ethic and feeling like I need to be doing something all the time, like this, you know, like cutting fabric for like 17 hours and then working for like, you know, hours on end, like it just made me feel like, okay, you know, I got a lot of stuff going on and transitioning into different things, but like I got a project, I'm okay, I can, you know, I can kind of work on this when I don't really know what I'm doing. So making these smaller pieces. And then this really big one. This is right when I moved to Los Angeles, and this guy is about, it's 15 feet by about 4 feet wide. And so at this point, yeah, like we moved cross country with, my husband got a job, but I really didn't have a place set up in the world. And so, I mean, it just shows my kind of warped priorities where like the first thing I do for like the first 2 months I'm in LA, I don't have a job, I don't really have any friends that are living there very close, and you know, like this sense of like being a bit overwhelmed, which I find like actually helps sustain my practice. Like I'm really, this helps channel it, and obviously, so I went to town on this. The interesting thing about this, I think, to me it seems like it's like a totem, you know, like it has that layout, but also like in the way that it's constructed. I mean, I can only work on so much at a time, so I would work on maybe a 3-foot section, and then that would be rolled up, and so it becomes this kind of exquisite corpse. Like I intentionally kind of kept it this kind of ongoing secret where I would work on a part, roll it up, work on the next part, and then in the end, I had no idea where it was going. All I knew is, you know, I got a 15-foot piece of fabric, and that was the idea, like, and I couldn't cut it short, like I couldn't stop, you know, everyone's like, well, this is good, you know, you can chop it off, but it's like, no, I had to keep going until it was finished. So it's like this, you know, this project that's like, has to come into being. So that's really where the parameters are. It's like the fabric itself, like that's the rule. And I did some kind of, Salvation Mountain, you should go there. I want to put some of my rugs on this mountain. I only saw this recently, but I think it's paradise. I put the big rug on the stairs. I kind of just started putting it different places because it's like too big for my house. I could never really see it. I mean, I would roll it out outside, and then it'd stand on a stool, and like there's no way to like see the whole thing. And I still feel like I can't really see the whole thing. That's me. I put it on a wall in Oakland. But that's the first time I saw it hanging up. And I like the idea, like I said before, about like, you know, the process of looking at it kind of like undoes your conclusions. Like you look at it, and then you get distracted, and you kind of move around, and so you're not able to see the thing ever, I hope. I hope that it's like kind of constantly re-engaging you as you look at it. So I just did sort of sections of it here. So like I said before, it's about 1/4-inch strips, so you can kind of see where just kind of like moving through the whole thing with I mean, I would never plan much more than, sometimes I'll intentionally stick in maybe some words, or I'll stick in, I'll make some eyes, and kind of, like this one I knew I wanted to have a totem figure, so I did a face. But beyond that, it kind of, like there's only so long you can kind of pay attention when you're working like that, you're working like 10 hours straight and kind of this close to something, like you can't really like pay attention that long. And I can't. So that's kind of what I like about it. It sort of fits how I operate. And I mean, here I was relocated. I was in this whole new city that's like really like lush. I mean, California standards. It's like, but it's like really lush and overgrown. And my neighborhood is like by the river, and there's all this like graffiti. I live in an area called Frogtown, and so there's all these like spray paintings of like frogs and different like strange kind of back and forth between like this river that's still kind of overgrown despite men like concrete and all this other stuff. There's still this like color and like overgrowth and that kind of thing, going back to like the farm where it's like there's still stuff kind of growing through everything and sustaining itself off that. And yeah, I mean, when I finish stuff like this, it's like I don't remember the specifics. It's like when you have a really long conversation and you can't remember what you said, but you remember like the gist of it. That's kind of how I think about these. I mean, I see like in this, there's like a bird's head in there, and I mean, I like that I can kind of incorporate something, but it's loose enough where you kind of lose it, and you might find it again. And then these are like this. The bottom is like these two snake heads coming together. That's a little splash factor. Again, there's like, there's a bird's head. There's like the haystack I kind of put in there sideways on there, because I kept working in like circles, and so I never really knew the orientation. So that was the one thing that I thought was interesting. I'm still kind of working at it from above, and so it still has this almost like there's still a landscape sense of like a map or something. Like you're kind of looking over this crazy otherworld map. So there's some close-ups. And then kind of deciding the edge as I get to it, and trying to keep that in mind so I can stop myself and actually pay attention to that. This is a more recent one. I don't know if I have a title for it yet. It's definitely like one of the stranger things that I've made lately. But again, this to me it still seems like it's this kind of like a map into something. Like it could be this layout of a place. Like there's like the symbols that are used in it that are kind of hinted at, like have a function within this. Like there is a sense of like narrative, like within it, and then also like between these pieces. And I have a show coming up next year where I'm going to have a lot of them set up together, and I'm interested to see how they become these characters. Because this one, they're so distinctly their own things. That I just want to see how they kind of function. And the last one here, this is again like going back to that big haystack, and like that shape that keeps coming back into things, and it's kind of followed me around through the years. And this one too, where I was stitching on one side before, and now I'm stitching kind of on both sides, and letting some of the fabric hang down and kind of act like different kinds of lines, like different kinds of textures are happening within it. And this is also 2 pieces. Because with this particular one too, I mean, I get so involved in it that I do tend to lose sight of like how I really want it to come out. And so when I first had this bottom piece done, and I realized I didn't really like it. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was too late. It was already done. So then, you know, I guess now the strategy is like adding on to that and trying to like, you know, use it as one piece of the picture. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I don't really ever get to see these things, and my walls aren't big enough, and the studio that I do have, it's only about 5 feet deep, so I usually have to go outside and look through a window to see them. So I always, then there's a reflection, then my face, so I always get like there's all these obstacles, and so in the end, I mean, it's this idea that like, that this piece really, you know, getting at what I originally wanted, or what I feel like I wanted, and what I feel like I'm getting at is like something that really does kind of come into being on its own terms, and it's sort of, the work kind of makes itself, and you kind of follow that, and that's how I've been able to kind of sustain a practice despite, you know, having 17 different jobs and living all over the country and different places in the world, like coming back to something that I think is kind of homegrown and like that has an earnestness to it, and that you know, that kind of speaks to where I'm from, but it also with like a very sort of psychedelic and all, you know, like I'm not really like most of the farm kids in my neighborhood, and so I think that I have like I have a strange take on things, and I want, like, again, like I want something to be funny. I want it to be kind of wild, and yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that happened. I'm looking at the clock. Do you guys have any questions about anything, or should I zip back? Yes. Oh, it's tricky. I mean, I never really time myself because I try to, and then I get so caught up in it that I don't. But I mean, I suppose you could. One of these days, I might time myself on like a foot by foot and do the math. But I mean, usually, I mean, this might have took me about 2 months, you know, with my life. But I mean, I would like work, you know, 8 hours at a time. So I mean, collectively, 150 hours or something like that, maybe. Because it takes forever to cut all the fabric too. That's the thing. Yes.
One, I have one way that you could time yourself.
Oh yeah.
Just leave a clock running.
I know. I need one of those chess clocks that they have on the Cosby Show.
And a different reference, this almost looks like a grass hut.
Yeah,
One of your other ones almost looked like a dinosaur or something.
Yeah, the last one, yeah, it's like this monster, like a sea monster. Yeah, I mean, I like this one. To me, sometimes it looks like a house, or like a mouth of a whale, or there's like all these different associations of like this, and it's almost, I feel like this one is almost a little creepy, like when you see it in person. It's big and it's almost life-size, like it really looks like, you know, you're in this particular space, in this particular place. Yeah. Yes. It's kind of, I mean, I kind of go with it. I mean, I try to plan ahead in a way where I'll just go and get a bunch of fabric and then cut it up, and I put it in piles. You know, I try to start out really organized, where I have like little bags and I have it all set up. But by the like 45 minutes into it, everything's all over the place. And so there's a point where I'm choosing colors based on like what's closest or what I have the most of. And so it's not it's definitely more intuitive, or like this kind of back and forth between, like, again, like this necessity, like how ill planning and how to deal with it, how to cope. Yeah.
And it seems like intuition is really important to you, throughout the whole fucking go to school and then go to grad school and then be part of our community. That tends to be you kind of learn more, maybe you feel like sometimes it stifles your intuition. Do you ever have any like secret fantasy about like you didn't leave Wisconsin? Like what kind of art you make?
If I didn't leave? Oh, I mean, I was, I was there growing up, and then I actually came back, like, after I moved to Holland, I came back for like 6 years. And so I was doing portraits. I was trying to make money, like, however I could. And so I did a lot of really bad portraits. Like, people would have me do portraits of their family portrait from, like, the 80s, where all the kids had perms and unibrows, and it's so hard. The lighting is so uniform that I did a lot of, like, bad portraits of people with a flash on, and they're like in a recliner, like close up. So I was doing a lot of different stuff that was definitely very like Wisconsin times. I also like taught myself how to weld, and I was making a lot of metal work that people were buying. So I think the biggest fantasy, how much time we got? So there was a point in my life where I wanted to go to Antarctica, and it didn't work out. But that's my one fantasy that would have played out in terms of like a landscape. Like I even got a job at my old high school when I moved back to Wisconsin, and I was living in the woods, trying to write my album, or I don't know what I was doing. But I got this idea that I was going to go to McMurdo Station and become a janitor. So I got a job at my old high school as a janitor for like a year and a half, because that's how much time you needed. And then, it's a long story, but I didn't go, and it has to do with some dude, but it's a big mistake. And then Werner Herzog made that movie about it, because I mean, I thought it would be like going to the moon, and I thought it would really help, kind of put me on like a moon station where I'd have to like deal with this isolation and like see how that manifested in like comedy or in art or in, I don't know, friendships, because no one's from there. I mean, you're gonna meet anybody. So anyway, yes. Oh, your grandpa lives in Antarctica?
Well, one of my grandpas lived there for a little bit, or at least in Alaska. Works at it.
Oh, okay. Oh boy. Good.
Came down here when I met my grandpa.
Well, it's paradise down here. You guys are lucky.
My friend's Monet a lot of the haystacks, so is that your favorite artist?
Ooh, I mean, I liked the guy for sure, and I think more like, I don't know, my favorite artists at this point, they kind of like, I'm trying to think. I have some like random. Chris Martin is a good guy for me. This is he's actually painting like on a kind of Afghan. This is like him painting on rugs. And these are like things that I found, kind of after, maybe simultaneous. I didn't know about these until I was kind of in my own dialogue with things. Charles Birchfield is, I started to like look into more surrealism. I started to realize like. Coming out of painting and like figuring out how I relate to this process. Like surrealism is like a big strategy. Let me go through. Tamara Gonzalez, like working with textiles. Ava Hess, her paintings were killing me. Like when I didn't really, I know about her sculptures, but I didn't really know about her paintings, and those were like a really big influence, because they were so weird and and that sculptural sense, and that like kind of combination of like sculpture and painting in the same place. Alfred Jensen. This is Ben LaRocco. So yeah, I don't know, like my for a lot. This is Craig Olson. These are just my homies. Chris Martin. Like Chris Martin will like make a painting, but like put bread on it and then paint over the whole works. And so like that sculptural thing, like trying to combine those. Tamara Gonzalez, that's his girlfriend. She's awesome. Nuskowski was a big guy for me, and that's why I went to Rutgers. Like Tom Nuskowski, definitely in terms of like how his painting philosophy, that really influenced me. And so I was following him around since I was like 18 or something. And then that's why I went to Rutgers, and he was teaching there. And we're friends. I did it. Yeah. That's Forrest Bass. He'd be a guy to meet. These are also blurry. Ugh, never mind. Anyway, so I don't know who my favorite person is anymore. No, I don't know. Yes. Well, lately with the fabric work or these things I'm working on now, I think people are more interested in them. I'm so used to having these kind of smaller paintings that nobody's really, you either get them or you don't, and like a lot of people didn't have much of a reaction, but maybe it's because of the size and because you can actually see like, they're so kind of overwhelming and it's like they're so in your face that I think people do respond to them a little bit more intensely, and so far it's been good. I mean, so far, yeah, they're like, and they fit more into California. I feel like the kind of like vibe here, whatever, like it's working more for, and the color scheme, I feel like, coming back from New York and that area, like I think they sit better here. So far, yeah, people are into it, and I'm on to that. All right, one more, anybody? Questions, comments? What can I say? That's all. Okay. Yay! You're welcome.